And part of walking that middle ground is to be centered, to live out of the essence of who God's designed you to be. Not your spouse, not your best friend, not successful person at the office.
Right.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who don't want to just survive, who want to really thrive. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us today. This week we are talking about responsibility.
Yeah, and a lot of what we've been talking about is, when responsibility gets overwhelming. We're overreaching our job somehow, and we're trying to do too much. And we need to cut that out because it's not the path to peace.
Right. Well, we talked about how Dr. May defines responsibility as respect for others and respect for ourselves. I think especially in the Christian world, we sometimes forget the love one another as we love ourselves. Like we emphasize the love and sacrifice for other people without, like, it's a balance. I think of it as scales that need to be perfectly balanced. We can't, or a cycle that builds on each other.
How many metaphors?
We can't love ourselves. Loving ourselves helps us love others better. Loving others helps us love ourselves better. And when we get out of balance on those, that's when we start having problems. Like if we sacrifice so much that we don't have any fruit left in our garden, then we have a problem. We're going to be burned out. We're going to be cranky, exhausted. We're not living in the people God called us to be.
Sure.
But then on the other hand, if we don't sacrifice at all, if we just are like, I'm going to love myself and I'm not going to love anyone else. Like that's not real love either. And we'll be miserable then too. Because we need others as part of our purpose and our, that epic lifestyle that we talk about. Like that feeling of joy and, doing the things that God's called you to do, that energizing effect. We miss out on all that.
Yeah, it's real tricky. I mean, it's so easy to identify the extremes and be like, well, I don't want to go there and I don't want to go there. But the middle path is hard to find in the midst of those things. But it does come from our relationship with God ultimately. We're talking about center today, and He is our center. He gives us our identity and our calling and our foundation to move through the world. And like you said, if we're not in touch with that, in touch with God's love for us and our love for Him, it's going to be impossible to treat other people with respect and to be responsible for our own work.
Right. And I think being centered, living out of the essence of who God designed us to be, is such a great way to walk that middle road. A good way to tell whether or not we're doing the things God's called us to do is how we feel about them, which sounds a little
About
bit...
what?
How we feel about those things, what it's like when we do them. Not just when we think about doing them, but when we actually do them, is it super draining all the time? Is it... There are just different little gut checks that we can go through. Derek Silvers talks about something like this in Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, the little section in his book there. He talks about, I think it's entitled, Is Your Red Face Worth It? And we've talked about this before on the show. It's this idea that he would do cycling. He would ride his bike along the beach. And he had a certain point where he always turned around and then came back. And he would, ride his little heart out. And he hated it. Like it got to be where he was dreading his ride and it was exhausting and he was cranky about it. And it always took 45 minutes to do this particular ride.
Yeah.
So he decided one day he would try to just take it slow. Well, actually, no, it took 43 minutes to do it. So he decided he would take it slow one day. And he just, took in the view and watched the seagulls. And when he got to the halfway point where he would stop and turn around, he looked around a little bit, and then turned around and came back, and it took him 43 minutes that day.
Yeah.
Oh, no, 45 minutes. Yeah, I'm kidding. I'm totally...
Right, but it was only
2 minutes more,
yeah,
right?
Not much.
So he talks about how, in our guts, we sometimes force ourselves to do things that are either not what we're designed to do or we're pushing ourselves too hard.
Yeah.
When really we could do the same thing with less stress and, minimal, like it's less energy, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, because we're supposed to be acting in the Spirit's energy, and our job is to really show up and say yes. And I don't know, we're listening to the Percy Jackson books on tape right now with the kids, and sometimes I listen to those books, I'm like, Percy doesn't really do anything. I mean, he waves his sword around every once in a while. I mean, like, the gods are doing these things, and there's stuff, I don't know, it's just... In some books, the main character's really like sorting
Superman.
it out, and yeah, but Percy doesn't actually have all that much power. And so, the red face thing, we don't have all that power, and we're cranking ourselves out there to save 2 minutes.
Right.
And we're really, if we're going to answer God's call, we just need to show up and say yes to that. It's not going to involve us racking our brain, and it's going to be hard work, but it's going to be fulfilling work. I think there's going to be a distinct difference there that we'll notice. Yeah,
if you're dreading doing something, then either it's not what you're supposed to be doing at all, or you're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah.
There's no scenario where we push ourselves through, which I need to hear this as somebody who has PTSD and has made a lifestyle of pushing through up until 8 years ago when my body was like, nope, no more pushing. But, I need reminded of that fact. Like, there is no scenario where we push through and do awesome, and that's what we're supposed to do. Like, there's no scenario where that's the best thing. Because if we're doing it in our own power, we're actually putting all this time and energy into building a straw house.
Yeah.
Something that's not going to last, something that doesn't protect us from the wolf.
Or something that, and it's not effective. I was thinking about this, I think last year sometime I was doing a Sunday school class, and I was trying to think of an example, and it must have had something to do with this, but it has to do with driving a few miles over the speed limit, which I tend to do. I kind of time myself, like, if I really push it and I'm like trying to get to church, speeding on the way to church is great, right?
Yeah.
And I get there, and then another day I just drove the speed limit, or maybe 5 over. It was much more relaxed, and it was like 1 minute or 30 seconds or so. It was nothing really, no difference hardly. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I don't have to be flooring it all the time to get there, because God's the one carrying, in life in general, not just to get to work, but point A to point B, or I think anything. If we're sprinting everywhere, that's frantic energy, and that's not where we're supposed to be living, It was amazing, just to be, I was like, I must be shaving minutes off my time here, and it's not really shaving hardly anything off.
Right.
And it's way more stressful to be driving that fast.
And I think we do that. Either we are forcing ourselves to do things that are not our gifting. We're an eye trying to be a hand, or a hand trying to be an eye, or whatever. Mm-hmm. We're putting ourselves outside of where God has designed us to be, or we're just doing it with our own power. We're not using the Holy Spirit's power, and we are using that frantic, stressed out energy, which, as we've talked about on calm days, that shuts down our creative thinking, our problem solving. It makes everything 10 times harder right there in 1 second. So, we need to be faithful. We need to walk that middle ground. And part of walking that middle ground is to be centered, to live out of the essence of who God's designed you to be. Not your spouse, not your best friend, not successful person at the office.
Right. Yeah, and this has to do with the self-examined life, again, which we always come back to, but it's know thyself, right? Know your personality traits, your skills, and trust that God made those things there, hardwired into your DNA for a reason. He needs he needs a person like you to do the job he wants you to do.
We love you guys, and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been listening to the show and sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do share it. And if you haven't signed up for our email list, you should go sign up for that. Yeah. It's a great way to get notified of all the podcasts rather than, I know some people that are on Facebook only see them on Mondays.
You can sign up on our webpage, epiceverydaynow.com.
Have an awesome Wednesday. Come back tomorrow and we are going to keep talking about responsibility and talk about being responsible in the middle of a community.
Yeah. Talk to you then.